Welcome to Franchise Spotlight, where we showcase unique franchise opportunities that give you the chance to build wealth, create a legacy, and take greater control of your future. Today, we're exploring Schooley Mitchell, a franchise that's built around solving a problem that every business knows it has, but rarely has the time or expertise to address: hidden costs, billing errors, and overpriced vendor contracts, all of which quietly drain the bottom line month after month. Let's put the spotlight on Schooley Mitchell. Well, my guest today is Dennis Schooley. Dennis is the founder of Schooley Mitchell. He started his career as a CPA before discovering inside his own practice the business that would eventually become the largest independent cost reduction consulting firm in North America. Dennis, welcome to the show today.
Well, thanks for having me, Scott. Hopefully my personality doesn't belie the fact that I'm an accountant, but we'll see.
Well, we'll judge that afterwards. How's that sound,
Yeah,
Dennis? That's good.
that's
I
fair.
love it. That's good. Well, let's dive right in. Dennis, most businesses have this long list of recurring expenses, right? They have their telecom bill, they have merchant processing, shipping, waste removal, utilities. All these invoices show up month after month. Somebody approves them, they move on.
Yep.
Very few companies have anyone whose job it is to ask whether those costs are as low as they can be, or even if they're accurate, right? So maybe we can start with the foundation. With that context, what does Schooley Mitchell do, and who's typically on the other side of the table when your franchisees go out to build their customer base?
Yeah, and I mean, and you're right about the fact that pretty much every business incurs some of these expenses that we look at. And even if they do have someone that's maybe looking at them to try to keep them lower, they really are negotiating with one invoice when they talk to their vendors. They really don't have a deep understanding of how these expenses work. And they may seem simple to most people, but they're actually very complex. So
Mhm.
that's what we're doing. And we're making sure they haven't had errors in their bills in the past. We're making sure their contracts make sense. We're making sure they're paying the right prices because, see, what we bring to the table is knowledge of the entire marketplace because we've done 34,000 clients. So we have that data, and that means we know where those vendors can go. And maybe more important than that is the vendors know that we know where they can go. So, an individual business that's incurring these expenses, they've got a lot more important things on their plate, whatever they do to make money. They're not really going to spend their time, nor should they, looking at these individual expenses and tearing them apart the way that we can with our people and our tools. And that's really what we bring to the table for the client. So I hope I answered your question.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great value statement proposition that you made there. I think that's great. Maybe just to restate it a bit, business owners or a finance executive at a business who a franchisee may be talking to,
Yeah.
again, theoretically, they could call their vendors directly, right? They could shop things around if they wanted to. They could try to renegotiate. Um, in practice, how often does that happen? And if it doesn't happen often, why not?
Well, I think it actually does happen. I mean, a lot of vendors or clients rather might call their vendor once a year, once every couple of years and pound their fist on the desk and say, I want a 5% reduction. I'm not going to stay. The
Okay.
vendor kind of rolls their eyes and goes, yeah, I hear this all the time. And they give them a small deduction and everybody's happy.
Mhm.
But that's not what we do. We understand where the vendors can go, like I said a second ago, and we understand how all these expenses work. We understand all the alternatives in the marketplace. So we bring a much different thing to the table, and it's a third party talking to the vendors rather than the client trying to do it themselves. So that's what we bring to the table. And yeah, to answer the question you asked me originally too, we're trying to talk to the financial people when we first
Okay.
start our conversations. That CFO, CEO, COO in a larger company, or maybe it's the controller or the owner in the smaller companies, the people that care about profits. That's who
Mhm.
we want to talk to because this is about increasing a company's profits. That's what we do.
Nice. No, I think that's great. Now, when we think about the complexity around all these different types of services and all the potential ways to save money and all the different ways contracts are structured, that seems like a pretty heavy analytical lift, right? Doesn't sound like an
Yes.
easy thing to do. Walk us through a little bit about how that actual analysis process works. Who's doing the work, and what does that mean for a franchisee? How's a franchisee spending their time in this
Yeah.
business?
And I'm glad you asked me that. I mean, our franchisees do not have to be experts in these 22 different cost categories that we look at now, and we're going to be introducing two or three more in the next 2 or 3 months. We have a research department, and that's their responsibility.
Mm,
But we're the
okay.
ones at our central office here, our head office, that are doing all the analysis. So we're looking at those bills and those contracts. We're benchmarking it. We're negotiating. We're understanding what differences there may be versus what they're paying and they should be paying. All those things are our specialized staff. We have 165 people working
Mm,
in our head office
okay.
here, and we've got specialists in each of those different cost categories. And you make a point about the complexity. I'll just give you one example. I mean, not very many people understand that in merchant services, there's more than 700 different pricing buckets that any transaction can fall into. I mean, who knows that? Well, our
Okay.
people do, right?
Okay.
I mean, the client, they need to collect that way because that's the way people want to pay. In order to run their business, they need to collect. But we know what they should be paying in order to be able to collect that way.
Wow, that's interesting. So, you talked about the sales conversation that a Schooley Mitchell franchisee would be having with their clients. Anybody who's interested in profit, CEO, CFO, owner, controller,
Yep.
those responsible for the financial health. It would seem like a good franchisee would have to have a certain type of credibility with those types of executives, right? I guess when you look across your franchise system, owners who've really built a meaningful business and they've really built trust, what do they have in common? Who does well in this system? And
Yeah.
maybe on the flip side, we'll just, who doesn't do well? Like what type of people don't do well in this
Well,
system?
we have a basic list of must-haves, Scott. And I mean,
Okay.
we only want to talk to people that maybe have a management, executive, sales, marketing, or consulting in their background sometime. But
Okay.
the critical thing is if they're comfortable talking to other business people, like the people you just listed off, then we know they can do well as long as they're willing to work 35 hours a week at the business. Those
Mhm.
are really the only two tests. Nothing else gets in their way. So, the thing about talking to, as you mentioned, maybe higher up people in the companies, there is a credibility because this is a we thing, not an I thing. If somebody
Mm,
tries to go in and just represent this whole thing by themselves rather than saying, Schooley Mitchell brings this to your table, this is what we can do, this is our knowledge base, this is our experience, that's a mistake by not doing that. But when you
yeah.
do that, no matter who you're talking to, they will understand that there's a lot more behind this whole thing than that single franchisee sitting at that desk.
Yeah, no, is a good point you make. So, the franchisee, a lot of your franchisees are single, solo operations. Is that correct? I mean, are the majority, most, or is it like a small percentage?
80% operate on their
Yeah.
own. But see, there's a leverage model built right into our model
Yeah.
because we're the ones doing all the work. So
Hmm.
even
Hmm.
someone that works on their own can still build a great seven-figure business, quite frankly. Now,
Sure.
about
Sure.
20% of our people want to grow even faster. So they will hire an employee or a subcontractor to complement their own efforts. So they're free to do that in our system either way they want.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. What ownership actually looks like in practice, right? Especially in that first year where they're out there, they're building their client base. I mean, from
Yep.
what I understand, the research I've done and the conversations I've had with some of your team, this very much is a flywheel type business, right? That you got to get it off the ground. You've got to start the ball rolling. You got to
Sure.
get the initial clients. So what does it look like when someone's starting out? What do they have to expect?
And that's something we're very clear when we explain that to a candidate. This is much like building any professional practice from the beginning, except you've got all our support and tools and systems and training and all that.
Mhm.
But really, it's about you got to get a client, you got to get the work done, you got to bill it, you got to collect it. So there's never going to be, it's not a drive through window where you're going to get cash day one, you start your franchise. But
Mhm.
the investment is really quite small. So, really, as long as you keep doing that and as long as you've got the financial stability to pay for your own personal expenses as you build up the business, it can be a fantastic business and you can make a lot of money. But there does have to be a patience factor in the beginning because there is no drive through window.
Okay, no, that makes sense. So you're out there. Your first year is a lot of business development, getting out there, doing the work, landing the first clients, and then it sounds like the actual revenue realization happens after the savings are realized. Is that correct? I understand that correctly.
Yeah. I mean, what we're doing is and I tell everybody in training, go get a client your very first week after training. So don't set your office up for 3 months. Go get a client. But
Right. Right.
even in that case, like I said, the work, all that has to get done. So it's going to be a few months, maybe 3, 4, 5 months before you start to build that client. But once you build that client, you're going to bill them every month for 36 months because our franchisee gets 50% of the savings for a 3-year period. So you're creating annuities for yourself. It's just that for first 4 or 5 months, you're making money, you're closing deals, but the collection follows. And
Mhm.
so that's where your first few months, like you said, you're building up that clientele. And as long as you do that, then they're going to come out the funnel on the other end just the same way, right? And that's going to put money in the bank, but it's not going to be that first month or two.
Sure, sure. No, that makes sense, and I like how you paralleled it with other professional practices. You know, it always takes time to get started to get that base of clients going. But
Sure.
the beauty of it is, it sounds like 36-month contracts are pretty standard in this in the
Yes.
Schooley Mitchell practice. So yeah, if you're
Yep.
building out 36-month contracts, that's a nice recurring revenue base for a franchisee.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it also makes it a saleable asset because there's an annuity attached to every single client you get. So there's a pretty strong exit strategy here as well.
That's nice. The, renewal rates, like, after the 36 months, is there a high renewal rate with clients, or do they say, "Oh, we've saved it all we can. We're done with this?"
Like I said before, it's going to be dependent on the franchisee to put in some time to build the business. It's going
Mhm.
to be dependent on the franchisee to obtain renewals. We've got really great systems and tools to build great relationships with the clients.
Okay.
The franchisees that use that, they have renewal rates of 65, 70% with their clients after that 3-year period. Now, of course, we've got some franchisees that ignore that and don't build that good relationship and they don't get renewals. So it really will
Mhm.
be subject to the franchisee following and using the system. Then the renewal percentage is 2/3.
Yeah, okay, good. So let's talk a little bit about growth, in the market context a bit.
Sure.
Everybody who's thinking about starting a business, they want to understand: is there room for this business concept in my local market in specific geographies? I guess where is Schooley Mitchell in its growth right now? How do you help a prospective franchisee really think through whether their local market is a good fit for this? Or is that something that doesn't come up because profitability is a universal business need?
Well, yeah, it's more the latter. I mean, first of all, we don't have territories, so they're not restricted to where they are anyway, so they can get clients anywhere. But just the
Okay.
same, anybody just needs to look and around them. Are there a multitude of car dealers and dental practices and accounting firms and small manufacturers? If there are, then this business works great. Or churches or charities or see anybody that incurs any of the expenses needs our help. And
Mhm.
so, unless you're in a really rural area and 2 hours away from anything that's got any population. This business is good everywhere. It really is.
Oh, that's excellent. Let's peel that back a little bit about territories. One thing that many people who think about franchising, they think about
Yeah,
exclusive territories, protected territories,
yeah,
and your model is different than that.
it is.
Explain what benefits there are to the franchisee, and really, what are there any protections? Would they feel at risk, like anybody can come in and take business right away from me, out from under my nose?
Well, we figured that out 28 years ago, Scott.
Okay.
So, I mean, but, really, this whole non-territory thing came from where we started, which was with just telecom 28 years ago. That's all we did. But
Okay.
when we started to look at assigning a geography, a hunk of land, like pretty much every franchise does, we started to realize, well, listen, if somebody's got a client in Boston, but they've got branches in Seattle and Orlando and Los Angeles and Toronto, we didn't want to say you can only do Boston. It didn't make sense. You needed to put the things together to get the best arrangement for your clients. So we realized geography should not be part of the criteria here. And so
Mhm.
that's why we say whoever the franchisee is, they get clients anywhere they want in the US or Canada. Now, your second part of the question is, okay, are they protected? The answer is yes. So what we do instead of protect a hunk of land, which, is subject to demographic constrictions like traffic patterns and mix of buyers and mix of competitors, and that better not change in 2 years because that's your hunk of land, right? That
Mhm.
doesn't affect us at all. So what we do is we protect any client they sign on what's called the permanent client registry. So that gets put on the registry. It's in our system. It can be checked in like 10, 15 seconds. And that client then is the property of that franchisee. Nobody else can do business with that client. So that's really important, really from three aspects. Protects the revenue stream of the franchisee,
Mhm.
make sure we're not bidding against each other, knocking heads, competing. That doesn't happen. And then it protects the asset because, like I said, there's a strong exit strategy here too. That's all protected by the permanent registry.
Okay.
Then we have something we call a temporary registry. Now, this is a little bit more complicated for a podcast, but I'll tell you how it
Hey,
works. So
I love the
here's
detail.
Here's what we do is we provide a pool of time to each franchisee that they can use to protect their prospects. So we give every franchisee 240 months worth of time, and they can use 3 months out of that pool to protect a nonprofit, and 7 months out of that pool to protect a car dealer, and 9 months out of that pool to protect a manufacturer. So as long as they don't use more than 240 months, they can protect whichever prospects are sort of in front of them over the next several months that they expect to pursue and hopefully close. And if they
Okay.
don't, they use those months for somebody else and they can add and subtract. It really works great. We don't have conflicts.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So I'm sure that that's something that you go into great detail in during the discovery process with
Yeah.
new prospective franchisees, so they really understand how is it that you're protecting their interests and that they can build their business with confidence. I think that's
Yeah.
terrific.
And I know that was a little complex, like I said, for a podcast, but it is how we do it. So basically, it boils down to we protect clients, we protect prospects. It has to be reasonable, though. That's it.
Mhm. Okay. No, I think that's great. I appreciate the transparency.
Yep.
Now, uh, when we think about cost reduction models, there's this interesting dynamic, I think. When the economy tightens, businesses start scrutinizing expenses.
Yeah.
It seems like this conversation that a franchisee of Schooley Mitchell can have is even more timely, but then there's probably still risk, right? Every model carries risk. So when we think about the risks, how do you perform, let's say during periods of economic downturn or periods of disruption, like COVID or things like that? What are the real risks that franchisees would want to understand before making a decision?
Well, in our case, those things are all great for our business. I don't mean they're great things that are happening to the world, but they're
Sure,
great
sure.
for our business. See, in a bad economic time, and like you said, whether that's caused by inflation, recession, tariffs, pandemic, doesn't matter what the cause is. But when that happens, the company's got to cut costs. Well, what they generally do is they cut costs that are going to hurt their business, like payroll, or they buy cheaper inputs or whatever it is. That's not good. We're going
Mhm,
to cut all those costs below the gross margin line for them and we don't charge anything to do that work. So we are 100% recession proof. And
mhm,
that way we can engage the values for that company. They don't have to lay off important people. And so we're achieving the same thing, but not affecting their operational capabilities. And that's why bad economic times are actually great for us. Now, in growth times, we're helping them cut costs so they can grow more efficiently as well. So those things don't affect us just like territories don't affect us.
mhm. No, that's it's very, very interesting. I think it's a very compelling story. When we talk about risks and business resilience, I don't think anybody's ever having a conversation about franchising now without asking about AI and digital disruption.
Yep.
What are you seeing in the expense reduction space? Is are AI systems coming after this industry and making franchisees obsolete because there's a software tool that can do this for them? What are we
I
seeing
I
in
love
this
this
space?
question actually, and I'm gonna give you a little bit of a long-winded story to show you why, in fact, AI is not a detriment to us. Now, are we using AI to improve our tools and efficiency and turnaround? Absolutely,
Mhm.
100%. But I'm gonna go back to our very beginning when we just did telecom, like I said, and it was local service, long distance, and really cell phones were just coming into play in the late 90s. But
Sure.
then somebody came out with a cell phone savings calculator on the internet. You know, the old internet used to come down like this. Anyway, they had that tool. Well, one of our franchisees was in an absolute panic saying, this is going to ruin our business. And I said right at the time, no, it's not. And here's why I know that. See, when we first started doing this, we always provide the client with three options. Always one with their existing vendors, how much we've been able to drive the price down there, and then two alternates. So they can choose what's best for them. Well, we would go through that presentation. They would choose their best option. We would give them directions, step by step on how to do it. Well, they wouldn't even call their vendor and make the change because they had more important things to do. So we realized very quickly if we didn't implement those recommendations for the client, we weren't going to get paid. So
Mhm,
we
mhm,
took that on. So now that begs the question, is somebody really going to go on the internet, find some kind of tool they trust, put their information in there, trust what comes back, and then call the vendor? Not a chance. So
mhm,
that all fell apart. And AI is really the same thing. Now, there's another part about AI. AI only functions based on either what's in the public domain or what's been put into it that they can learn from. Well, that's not what we do. We've got specialized prices for every single client with every single vendor. So we negotiate every time. We've actually got 5,200 vendors that we've built relationships with. And a lot of them, we've got special Schooley Mitchell pricing. Well, that's not public information.
Hmm.
Okay. So
Okay.
all of that stuff protects us from that phenomenon that could come in and eat our lunch sort of thing. That just won't happen. Now, like I said, we're certainly using that to help with our efficiencies. And here's what's really happening, and I think you would agree that the AI world is a cowboy world right now. I mean, who
Oh,
knows? Half of it's not even really AI, it's database stuff. But, that's going to settle down. It's going to commoditize. Guess what we're going to consult about? AI.
no, I think that's a good perspective. Thank you, Dennis, because that is whenever you have analytical services as your primary value,
Yep.
people wonder, how is digital disruption going to affect that? And the answer has become pretty universal in every industry. There's the fear mongering that says AI is taking everyone's job.
Yeah,
And then they realize the people who use AI to get better at the value they deliver are going to outperform everyone else. And
that's
and
right.
I think that you're stating that as your experience here. So that's good.
Yes.
That's good. So here we're talking. Think about a little bit about the investment that a potential franchisee would make.
Yep.
We have a home based concept. There's no inventory. There's no build out. There's no physical location for housing staff. This capital profile for getting into a Schooley Mitchell franchise is a lot different than what most people think of when they think
Yeah.
of investing in a franchise. So, at a high level, what does the investment look like for Schooley Mitchell? What financial profile are you looking for in a client? What makes a good uh,
Yeah. I mean,
ready franchisee?
it's inexpensive, and I almost hate saying that because it's not like we're not a business that can build something really valuable, because we are, and
Mhm.
yet our franchise fee is $73,000. There's not much more cost.
Mm.
You need some envelopes and stationery and letterhead and stuff, but,
Mhm.
you buy that in the beginning, it'll do you for a year, but beyond that, this is not the business itself, the franchise is not about controlling costs. It's about building relationships and obtaining clients and building up referrals. We consult about cost control, but it's not important to our franchise. The cost is the cost, and that's it.
Mhm. Okay, so it really is, investment in the franchise fee, and then whatever staples they need to run the business. They'll need their
Yeah.
computer, they'll need their cell phone, they need their vehicle, and if whatever they have, they can use, and if they
Gas
need to
and
buy it,
lunch
they buy it.
and,
Yeah,
chamber memberships, things
sure.
like that. But
Yeah.
yes, most people already have that computer, that cell phone, that printer scanner, and that's really all we need. And
Mhm.
then it's just about those ongoing stuff, things every business run, phone and lunch.
Yeah. Now, because you're providing so much value as part of the service delivery, your royalty structure is different than your standard franchise, which says,
Yeah.
8% of gross revenues. Could you talk a little bit about the ongoing relationship and the value that franchisees realize for the revenue sharing they do with you?
Sure. And a lot of franchises will make their money on selling hamburger meat and muffler parts and coffee grounds to their franchisees, or trucks or whatever it might be. We don't have any of that. So our royalty is 8%. Our marketing fee is 2%, although we do have a royalty holiday for the first 12 months where they don't pay any royalties in their first year.
Okay.
That's just a benefit we started back in the pandemic, and we just keep doing it. Then there is a 30% fee for our analysts to do all the work, not just initially, but we look at those bills again every month for 36 months. So we're doing this all throughout the 3-year period. So really what it is, Scott, is a 60% margin business. And that's what it is. There's very little
Mhm.
cost after that. Let's say we
Okay.
save the client $2,000 a month. That
Okay.
means our franchisee is going to receive $1,000 a month for 36 months. Out of
Okay.
that
Got it.
$1,000, they will pay us $100 for the royalty and the marketing fund fee, and then
Mhm.
$300 for the production fee. So they keep $600 out of the $1,000.
That's great. So that helps people understand what the revenue looks like
Yep.
and what they're keeping, what stays with their business versus what they're paying for. Right.
Yep.
All right. No, that's excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Let's talk a little bit about support and systems. So we've talked at length about the analyst team that really is the engine of delivering the value here for clients.
Yeah.
So that's good. But there are a lot of things that that franchisees need to run a successful business. So,
Yeah.
could you talk a little bit about what the support structure looks like for a Schooley Mitchell owner, and what's the initial training they get, and what support do they get ongoing through the years as they're managing and
Well,
growing their client
yeah,
base?
we're very proud of that part of the business too. And we have 165 people working in our head office here. About half of them are analysts specializing, like I said, in each of these cost categories. The other half are supporting the franchisees in all different ways. So we've got 12 or 14 people in our marketing department. So we've got content writers, videographers, social media people. All that's just part of what we provide. There's no additional
Okay.
fees for any of that other than that 8% and 2%.
Mhm.
Um, every franchisee is assigned a one-on-one coach for 3 years as soon as they finish their training. So nobody's ever left alone, and they're always working with somebody on our team. Now we've got all the other departments you would expect in a business as well, like IT support and client relations and franchisee relate. We've got all of those departments as well, all aimed at helping our franchisees as well as that research department I said before. We do everything we could possibly do to help and guide a person to make a great amount of money and build a great business, but they've got to do it with our
Mhm.
help.
Mhm. No, following the system is obviously critical, and executing the plan, obviously very, very
Yeah.
critical. Um, and again, because the service you're offering is one of those universal horizontal services, any business that has expenses, any entity,
Yes.
like you mentioned, nonprofits or others that have expenses is a potential client. So I can see why if they don't follow the system, they might not succeed. If they follow the system, they're more likely to succeed, right?
They got to get out of bed. That's about it. They got to just keep doing what we're doing. And if you, I mean, really, I mean, it's not really this simple. We got better scripts, but really what you're
Sure.
saying to people is, can I get you some more money? No
Mhm.
cost from me. Let's see what we can find.
Yeah.
I mean, people say no to that, but lots of people say yes to that too. But that's really what we're doing. And as long as somebody keeps doing that, they're going to get clients and they're going to end up marching up the scale.
You're absolutely right that it's as amazing as it is, some people say no to an offer like that, right?
Sure.
The offer can be really good, but a franchisee needs to expect that, if they go out on, 10 sales calls in a day, they're not gonna walk back home with 10 new contracts, right?
Right.
They have to be prepared for the, you know, I'll think about it, need to understand more. What's the catch? Maybe I'm not ready right now. Maybe I don't really see it as a big problem. I've got 10 other priorities first. Right. So there's still, you need franchisees who are going to be diligent and follow up and
Yeah.
do the work, right?
No, that's exactly right. We talk about a certain survey that's done, not just about Schooley Mitchell, but all sales. And that is that, 80% of sales are made after 5 contacts. And
Mhm.
yet 50% of salespeople never follow up even once. So it is about establishing a cadence and things like that. But we do know, Scott, that our close ratio is 30%.
Mm.
And we know that because we surveyed 100% of our franchisees. Now, that says if I do have 10 visits in whatever period of time,
Mhm.
I'm going to get 3 clients, but that means 7 people are going to say no out of 10.
Mhm.
That's kind of hard to understand because we're just saying, do you want more money? But
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you
yeah,
said, I mean, there's priorities. I mean, some people will say, and this isn't logical, but they say, I don't want to pay you 50%. Well, that doesn't make any sense. You're only paying 100% to the vendor.
yeah.
What we
That's
want
right.
to
I'd
really
rather
make them
pay twice that
understand,
amount.
yeah, is
Yeah,
that you're
yeah,
not paying us anything. We're gonna go
yeah,
get money from the vendor. We're gonna give you some and keep some. How about that?
yeah,
You know?
yeah. No,
So
that's a
there's
good point. Yeah.
there's always good responses, but people are people and not everybody will say yes. But we do know 3 out of 10 say yes, and that's awfully high.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's a great data point, for your system wide to have 30% close rate. That's excellent. Yeah, I like that. So, when we think about, the things that franchisees, when they're evaluating multiple concepts, maybe they're considering Schooley Mitchell alongside some other
Yep,
concepts, maybe in other industries. There are structural characteristics of a business. Some things are a good business and it's obvious to them it's a good business. Other businesses, they struggle to see why would something be a good business. So,
right.
from a pure business fundamentals standpoint, what are some of the things that you think make Schooley Mitchell an attractive business for a franchisee to become a part of?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we're a professional business. So, we're in that realm where the accountants, the lawyers, the financial planners are, and that carries a certain value to people that want to be in that world. We're in the B2B world. We're not dealing with, the fickle residential marketplace. So some
Okay.
people want that, but we're not for everyone. Some people want a restaurant, they want a donut shop, they want a muffler shop. That's fine. That's not for us. But professional B2B, that's us. We are very proud of what we've built. Our tools, we've been building them for 28 years. We've invested millions of dollars to do that. Our support system is, I think, as good as anybody, including the McDonald's of the world. We've got a unique offering in a huge marketplace. So that's what we have. But it does take an effort of the people that are going to join. So, we've got to make sure they fit those criteria for us. They've got to make sure, yep, this is what I want.
Yeah, the compelling reasons why somebody would want to consider a Schooley Mitchell franchise. I think you landed it. So
Well,
thank
there's
you.
other I mean, recurring revenue stream, no territory restrictions, it's portable, great
Mhm.
exit strategy. We tick all the boxes that somebody wants, other than if somebody wants something on the retail world or
Mhm.
in, hands-on world. We're not that. We're the
Mhm.
B2B. But otherwise, most people that are looking at a franchise, they got a whole lot of boxes they want to tick. We tick them all.
Mhm. So one of those boxes that comes up often in my conversations with the clients of mine is the amount of time an owner needs to spend on the business.
Yep.
Sometimes they call it semi-passive, semi-absentee, this, that, the other thing,
Yep.
part-time, full-time. What is a successful owner? What do they have to be prepared to invest in the business from a time perspective in year one and beyond?
You know, Up until about 2 years ago, we required full time to be committed to our franchise. Now that can be the franchisee or they can hire someone, but we
Okay.
required that. We do now have a part-time option where if someone needs to keep their job or their spouse needs them to keep their job or for whatever reason, we do have a part-time option where they can build it. It's gonna be more methodical and slow than if you're, spending a work week on your business, but as long as they've got 5 or 10 hours available each week, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, then we will entertain having them build it up more slowly until they get to that point they can become a full-time franchise. But really, if we're looking at what we call our standard franchise, we want to know someone's going to commit 35 hours a week to that business. That could
Mhm.
be, two people sharing it. It could be one person. It could be somebody they hire. So we've got a lot of different gyrations on how this can work. But if you don't work at it, nobody's going to come up to your house and knock on your door and ask for cost reduction consulting. So you got
That's
to get
right.
out and build up those
Yeah.
referral relationships.
Yeah. No, that makes good sense, and thanks, Dennis, for sharing that part. The the ownership model is a really important consideration, because that's
Yep.
the one of the number one filters people use. Do I need to quit my job and go full time into this today
Yep.
versus can I keep the W-2 if this is my first business that I've owned? Or in other cases where someone may have other businesses that they're running as an executive, can this be a part of a portfolio that they run? And is there a model that supports that as well?
Yeah, it can be as long
Mhm.
as, like I said, they've got that 5 or 10 hours as a minimum they can commit to our business because nobody's gonna seek you out. You've
Sure.
got but there's a lot of businesses that have their own business clientele, and this is a perfect business to run beside that because
Add
they've
on
already
for
got
'em.
trustful relationships with their
Mhm.
clients. They can just bring our service into the fray and make a lot of money and fairly quickly.
Um, let's go with a kind of a final takeaway. We've talked about what the business is, who builds it well, what the model's outcomes are, what the value is to clients. We covered a lot of things.
Yep.
If someone's watching this and Schooley Mitchell's on their short list, what's the one thing you'd want them to carry with them out of this discussion? What's the one thing you'd like someone to remember?
Well, to understand they can build anything that they've dreamed about building. Most people that are looking at a business have some sort of dream or goals that they look at in the future, what they really want out of life and they've never been able to get to.
Mhm.
We allow for that. I mean, we actually have models where anything that they've thought about has been achieved. And,
Mhm.
Abraham Lincoln said, if a person can do a thing, it's proof that others can as well. And that's really what we kind of hang our hat on is the fact that here's the proof, but you've got to work at it. But if you want to build this thing that you've dreamed about, you've wanted all your life, we've got a tool for that. As long as you're the right kind of person, comfortable talking to other business people and want to work in a B2B environment. That's us.
Beautiful. Well, Dennis, I really appreciate the time you've given me today, and that you've been able to share so much about the Schooley Mitchell story and the opportunity with our listeners. Thank you very much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me, Scott. I really appreciate it, and I'll come back anytime you want me to.
So there it is, Schooley Mitchell, a strong concept. But a strong concept isn't necessarily the same as the right concept for you. Franchise fit is very personal. It's not just about what you can afford or what's available in your market or how other people are succeeding. It's about matching the right model to where you are trying to go, the income level you need, the lifestyle you're trying to build, and the way you want to show up every day. Clarity on those questions before you start your search is what separates a focused process from months of spinning your wheels. And that's where I can come in. Book a no-cost 20-minute call with me. I'll learn a little bit about where you are, and we'll both find out whether working together makes sense. If it does, we'll narrow the field to what's genuinely worth your attention. I'm Scott Elliott, and this has been another episode of Franchise Spotlight.